Not quite as promptly as I'd wished, but I suppose in the circumstances, the best we can hope for. Mr. Nsibeza, before you start your cross-examination, I must remind the witness he's still under oath. Mr. Nsibeza? You said you wanted to report on progress in your talks with Mr. Bam.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, the talks were fruitful. The arrangement, Chairperson, is the following. That Mr. Bam has explained to me there's one issue or topic that he wants to clarify. And we've agreed that he should do that before my cross-examination. If it so happens that after my cross-examination he needs to clarify any point, then we'll cross that bridge at that stage, so that because it's a bridge that might not arise, so that we don't debate something which might end up being of academic importance.
That sounds sensible. So you will know whether he thinks you've scored some points if he tries to cross-examine after you finish.
Thank you, Chairperson.
We look forward with interest to see what happens later on. All right, thank you. Mr. Nsibeza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, before I start to cross-examine the Deputy President, I just want to make a declaration and acknowledge that I do know him. And at one stage we had the privilege of serving in an organization called Freedom Under Law. And that is an organization that we both on one day at one time sent emails resigning from. You'll recall that.
I do recall.
Yes, yeah. And
of that to our terms of reference.
Context.
It's presenting a context, Mr. Chairman, just so that you should relax. I come in peace.
Context is everything, as the SCA is fond of saying.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Also, I just want to make the disclosure that when you became Deputy President of the ANC, I sent a letter from Barloworld expressing the view that business would probably feel a lot more confident in your ascendancy to that position, because it might lead you to being president of the country, and business would welcome that development. Yes. So when the chair was talking about EBITDA, I could relate to that, because that serves also in some of our board meetings in Palo Alto. Now that having been cleared, I'd like to play Exhibit T 4011. And I would like this to be played from 12:57 to 13:02.
Just explain what it is.
It's the documentary minus short filmed by Rehad Desai. I'm reminded it's not just short down.
We're looking at the part of the
12:57 to
we're expected
13:02.
to see. So, what is the reading? 10:57. We're looking at
It's
12:57.
12:57.
I see. All right, we've got 12:47 at the moment, so we wait 10 seconds. We'll be where we should be.
The miners joined the fight against apartheid, and I took my place, marching side by side behind their banner.
It must be remembered that it was the mining industry, and specifically the Chamber of Mines, which pioneered the most oppressive features of apartheid South Africa.
Stop there. Now, I take it, Deputy President, that you believed in that statement at the time you made it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
May I dare to suggest that, in fact, when we talk about these oppressive features. The primary feature was the massive exploitation of black mine workers. Would you agree?
I would agree.
One of the features would be forcing them to work and live in subhuman conditions. You have even indicated that to Mr. Murai Toby, that one of the oppressive features would to force the workers to live in subhuman conditions. Would you agree with that?
I would agree.
And paying them paltry wages.
I would agree.
And the system of the migratory labor system.
I would agree.
You will recall, I'm sure, with the kind of experience you have, that, I will link it up with the Bantustan system, that when in 1894 the Glen Grey Act was passed in the Cape Parliament, Cecil John Rose actually made it very clear, with the discovery of diamonds and gold, we must create reserves.
Yes.
They were called reserves, but we came to know them as a reservoir of cheap labor because that's what they became.
Yes.
In fact, if we could, there's exhibit, Chairman, XX7, an article by Gavin Hartford, and if we could put it up there, because I would want to look at page 2, the second paragraph thereof. It is a well-known truism that migrant labor was not only the core foundation and economic imperative for SA mining industry, but also the labor market infrastructure from which the entire Bantustan system and the apartheid order were built post-1948. You wouldn't disagree with that statement?
I wouldn't disagree.
Now, again, one of the main features of migrant labor was that mine workers only got to return to their homes periodically, once or twice a year. Is that right?
That is true.
That in itself, you would agree, was inhumane.
Yes.
Now, if we could go to that documentary, we would like to play from 1321 to 1341, the same exhibit, Mr. Chairman, 011, TTT 4, 011 VOB. (1321 to 1341). You can play from there.
Mine workers have always had to put up with harsh living and working conditions. Cyril Ramaphosa was determined to change this. Under his leadership, workers were led into mass strikes and direct confrontation with the white mine owners. He was, for
Stop
me...
there.
You up to 1337.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. You wouldn't disagree with that statement made by Mr. Riyad Desai?
No, I would not.
Now, we now know that you were Secretary General of the largest trade union in the country in the 80s, the National Union of Mine Workers.
General Secretary.
General Secretary. Oh, yes.
Yes.
What did I say? Secretary General.
You said Secretary General. Yes.
Well, you went on to become Secretary General
What's the difference?
of another organization called the ANC.
Indeed.
Yes.
The difference, Mr. Chairman, is often that unions refer to their secretaries as General Secretary, and political parties refer to their secretaries as Secretary General.
Thank you.
Which would be a higher level of positioning.
So what I just want to point out, and I'm sure you're in agreement, was that when you led NUM, as you did, the purpose was, amongst other things, to fight against these kinds of injustices.
Yes.
And you achieved many victories, correct?
Indeed.
Yes. What do you consider some of your most noteworthy victories to have been? Just the high level.
Well, at a high level, the most important victory by mine workers was just being able to be organized. Since 1946, when the African Mine Workers Union was crushed by the apartheid regime, mine workers had tried on a number of occasions and had failed to organize themselves into a viable formation. So the success in getting them to form their own union, which was the National Union of Mine Workers, was a major achievement. The other major achievement was the failure on the part of mining industry to crush the union, and that clearly exemplified during the 1987 strike, which was meant to cut the union to a small size. I think the overriding achievement was also giving mine workers dignity. Mine workers used to be the most oppressed, the most degraded, and the most despised of all industrial workers in our country. And the union, in organizing them, was able and succeeded in giving them dignity. And the fourth one was being able to sit at the negotiating table and negotiate with their employers. And those, I would say, would be the key victories. And thereafter, the overriding one was to begin to raise the issue of working conditions, health and safety issues with the mining companies so that mine workers could be treated better. Those were the key victories that I can think of.
Yes. But I want to suggest to you that despite those victories, and one cannot downplay it, and the centrality, for instance, of the NUM in the Federation COSATU and the other unions that were established, notwithstanding that there was no enabling legislation. But would you agree with me that despite these victories which you have indicated, there's still a long way to go? Miners still do dangerous, physically difficult work. Is that right?
Yes, there is still a long way to go. Mine workers still do very dangerous work.
And they still earn wages which are not sufficient to sustain their families, and I think that came through.
Yes, I would agree.
And in fact, on the wages that they get, they would struggle to educate their children so as to liberate their children and their families from poverty. You would agree with that?
Yes.
So in many cases, their children are also condemned to become migrant laborers. In fact, we've had evidence here where this was made by one of the workers, that their children were also destined to become migrant laborers in the mines in order to try and sustain themselves and their families. You are familiar with that?
I am familiar with that.
Now, I understand, before this whole thing about 12,500, that mine workers were not earning more than 5,000 rand at the time. That was basically the average that each mine worker was earning. Net. The rock drill operators, RDOs.
Yes.
Do you agree with that kind of estimate?
At which time, at which point? Right now or even before?
Before the strike of 2012.
So before August 2012.
Before August 2012.
Essentially before the 9th of August 2012 when they had the meeting.
Indeed.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't have to canvass it with you. There's very little that one can do to support a family on 5,000 rand, and particularly mine workers who still have to maintain themselves in Marikana and maintain another family at home. You agree with that? Now, for the most part, therefore, I'm being reminded that I know when you nod, you mean yes, but it doesn't come up in the...
Oh, okay, yes.
Yes.
Yes. I should say yes. Then.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I would, just say yes.
Yes, the recording machine does. The recording machine
Can't
does not
see you.
recognize my nods. Yes,
Yes.
Mr.
And
Chairman.
I think Mr. Sebez would like you to say yes to every question. I'm not sure you'll necessarily do that.
I
I
am
won't lead you down the garden path.
distinctly becoming aware that that's what he would like me to do.
Right. For the most part, I mean, you have said it in your evidence under cross-examination from Mr. Ngwaitoba, I think, or to Mr. Badlander, that for the most part, they still live in subhuman conditions.
Yes.
Yes. Now, I would like us to go back to that exhibit. Okay. In fact, before we get that, but if it could be prepared, exhibit XX7, page 3, but a large percentage of mine workers, particularly rock drill workers, which are constituting 80% of the workforce, are still migrant laborers, correct?
Yes.
If we could have page 3, second paragraph of exhibit XX7. Second paragraph. The hard reality is that the pattern of migrant labor, super exploitation, characterized by 12 long months, with only a Christmas and Easter break, has remained unaltered in the 18 years of democracy. You see that?
Yes.
And you agree?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I just like to request you that you shouldn't be modest, because I'm going to come up with what I regard have been your major achievements during the course of our struggle. Now, Mr. Badland had suggested to you that you are being modest, and it is around this whole issue of your skills as a negotiator and the role that you played, very central role that you played in the debates up to and leading to our democracy. And I want to highlight those because if I understood your evidence well, I was a bit troubled by the fact that it seemed to come across as though you were suggesting that negotiations in the midst of a turbulent and a violent situation are not possible. I may have got you wrongly. Now, you will agree with me that when you were part of that ANC delegation that successfully negotiated the peaceful transition to democracy with the apartheid government in the main, those were turbulent times, difficult times. Would you agree?
I would agree.
In fact, in that period of time, there were two massacres. The 1992 Bishop massacre, 7th of September. You will remember that you were part of that march to Bishop, but 23 ANC supporters were mowed down by machine gun fire by the Khoza government. You remember that?
I do remember.
There was another massacre, the Boy Patong massacre, that you can never forget.
Indeed.
That massacre was of such intensity that it almost derailed the peace talks, isn't it?
Indeed.
The murder of Comrade Krisani was one of those epoch-making events that could easily have dealt with this. So violence was at the center of it. Do you agree with me?
I would agree.
But in fact, you and Rolf Meyer made it possible to bring back the negotiating parties from the brink of that abyss. Come back, because there's no other way. The only way you are going to achieve the objectives is to negotiate.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm putting all of this because of the kind of person that you are.
Yes.
That a number of us are asking, I mean, why did we end here when at the center
Yes.
of that there was Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa? I mean, so as I begin to look at your emails, because I'll come to that, not because, there is anything, but to see the nuance. The question is always going to be, and I'll put it to you, that in spite of the fact, during that time, in spite of the fact that there were moments when we thought peace can never be achieved,
Yes.
because of the violence, the levels of violence. In fact, in the TRC, we have established that there was more violence in that period than there ever was during the entire apartheid era.
Yes.
But you kept on negotiating until a peaceful settlement was arrived at.
Yes.
So, I want to suggest that in view of the successes that were achieved by the National Union of Mine Workers under your leadership, Charles, and your role in negotiations that led to the birth of our newfound democracy,
Yes.
it really goes without saying that you are a skilled negotiator. You are nodding. Put modesty aside. Don't nod. Say yes. You are a skilled negotiator, you are a skilled mediator, and you are a strategist. You must agree with that, don't you? Never mind your madam. Never mind your man. You have been described as that. And there is, when the Constitutional Assembly met in 1996, you were there.
Mr. Chairman, it is a description that I find difficult to deal with because it's possible that it is a bit overstated. And as you correctly say, I tend to be a bit modest. I don't try to overemphasize my own abilities. I work together with many other people, and it is when I work with other people that I'm able to be effective. And I guess when they also work with me, they become effective. So I believe in mutually beneficial type of talent, action, and sharing.
Would it be safe to say that in helping us to get safely to democracy, you didn't underachieve?
Mr. Chairman, it would be safe to say we collectively as South Africans did not underachieve.
Look, that's a fair statement to make, and I'm sure you know that that is also what Madiba used to say.
Yes.
That, but there is no doubt that everybody or a number of people acknowledge the centrality of Madiba or his leadership skills. This is just what I want to be putting to you. That in spite of the fact that you may not like the way I put it, maybe I'm too glowing in the terms I'm putting it in, it is so that you are a skilled negotiator, otherwise the results wouldn't be what they were. You are a skilled mediator and a strategist. Would you at least agree that this is my view or this is how you are perceived?
Let me say that it is your view, and with respect, I would like you to accept that I see it as your view.
You wouldn't disagree with it? It's a generally held view. Don't be evasive. It's a generally held view, isn't it?
It is your view. Thank you.
Yes. Anyway, you would agree with me that in order to negotiate, to mediate in a dispute, one of the central features of being able to do that is you have to know the underlying facts.
Yes.
Isn't that right?
That is correct.
You have to make sure that the facts that you are being given are correct.
Yes.
And there are always two sides to your story. You happen also to be a lawyer. And indeed, you have to understand what each party's grievance is. Is that right?
Indeed.
And the parties to a grievance often misunderstand or misstate what the other side's grievance is. And as a mediator, you know. That's why sometimes there are confidentiality sections. And that is precisely, why you have to have the skill to understand that you may be given something else other than what is the truth.
Indeed.
Because you know what parties are. Parties are concerned about their own case.
Yes.
You as a negotiator, a mediator, you want to get the complete picture.
Indeed.
Yes. Now, I would like to put up one of the emails. I know, Mr. Chairman, is B4, but I don't know whether it's 5 or 6, this one, but it's the one in which Deputy President said, I spoke to Senzeni Zokwana, President of NUM.
Which one do you want?
It's probably 4.1.
Triple B41, that's page 14.
Yes. Is that oh, yeah. I think paragraph 2.
He spoke to the future Minister of Agriculture.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Current Minister of Agriculture and Forestry. You have read that, have you?
Yes, I have.
Yes. Now, I'm sure this question has been asked in a different way by Mr. Butlander, but may I just ask it? Why were you only in a meeting only with NUM? Because during the relevant period, I am not aware that you made any attempt to conduct AMCU, for instance, and to engage with them. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is true.
Now the question is, why didn't you?
I referred to Senzeni Zokwana and Franz Baleni and James Mutlatse because I know them and I have worked with them and I have their contact details. I was not able to make any reference to any leader of AMCU because I do not have any details of them and I have not dealt with them.
I mean, we have had evidence here that Lonmin, and possibly you too, I don't know, believe that AMCU was behind the strike and the violence. Did you know about that? I see Mr. Zokwana has joined us. I was just saying to Deputy President that there is evidence here that Lonmin and possibly you too
Yes.
believe that AMCU was behind the strike and the violence.
Yes.
Yes. Now, it's been shown in the commission that that was not correct,
Yes.
that AMCU was not behind the strike and did not incite any of the violence that was associated with it. Now, but if it was you and Lonmin's belief at the time that AMCU was somewhat to blame for the strike and or the violence, now wearing your hat as a skilled negotiator, as a skilled mediator, you would agree with me it was even more of a reason that you should have engaged them. The fact that you didn't have Matunjwa's cell phone number, which Lonmin had, cannot be a reason. But the question I'm putting to you, isn't it so that it was even more of a reason that you should have engaged AMCU? Given that you are who you are.
Yes, I think maybe let's put this in broader context. You have referred to negotiations and how one should approach negotiations. And this, in many ways, Mr. Chairman, was what one could call a perfect storm that had evolved. Firstly, AMCU was saying that they are not involved in all this. So in a way, abdicated. Secondly, the CEO of Lonmin, who I rate very highly in as far as interacting with workers is concerned, had taken ill, so he was not on the spot to negotiate. Thirdly, the NUM itself was not really involved because, as we heard earlier, a number of the workers who were protesting or who were demanding this had lost confidence in the NUM by the NUM's own admission. So you had a situation where, whilst negotiations would have helped, would have borne fruit, you had a huge vacuum. And as a non-executive director who is not involved in the management of the company on a daily basis, one relied on the management team on the ground to deal with all these matters. And as often happens in this type of situations, it is the management team that has the responsibility to negotiate with unions, to find settlement, and quite often the non-executive directors are hardly ever involved in negotiating with unions. What you referred to in the email where I was saying, referring to Mr. Senzeni Zokwana, Minister, where I was referring to the General Secretary and also James Mutlatsi, was to refer to people who have been in the NUM and who, if we could have met, would have found a way of dealing with this strike and putting some ideas on the table. I myself would hardly ever have been involved because I was non-executive director of the company.
Yes, I mean, there's merit in everything that you have said. The only point I make is this. When you decided to engage a union, knowing full well that, on just what you have said, that there was waning support for NUM, and that there was a belief, your belief and Lonmin's belief, that AMCU was behind the strike. What you didn't do, and it is, unless there's something else, that paragraph 2 shows that when you decided to engage anyone from the working class, at Lonmin you decided to engage with the president of NUM to the exclusion of the other union. You made no attempt to contact the other union. That's the only point I make. Do you accept that?
I accept that, and I have given my reason.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, we all know that the issue was a strike for salaries, but their primary demand was simply for management to engage with them. You recall that?
Yes.
And this is a request they made repeatedly. Did you know that?
Yes.
And if that is so, may I suggest that the quickest and the most amicable way to have brought the strike to an end would have been for Lonmin management to engage with our strikers. Isn't that right?
Yes.
But of course, the strike will not end quickly and amicably without both Lonmin making concessions to the strikers, and thus a likely change in the status quo for both Lonmin and NUM. You would agree with that?
That's what often happens in negotiations.
Give and take. You are an experienced hand in this. Now, if Lonmin had engaged with the strikers early on, you know there was the 10th and the 11th and the 12th and the 13th and whatever. When the RDOs had first asked to engage with management on the 10th, in fact, I may be bold to say that up to the 12th, which is the day on which, when they got to management, management said, we are not going to talk to you, we are going to talk to NUM. We are not going to talk outside the structures, even though they went there.
That was the 10th, that was Friday the 10th.
On the 10th, yes.
So, the 12th, remember, was the Sunday.
Oh, yes, yes.
The 10th is the day they went to what they call the time office, the LPD.
Yes.
And they wanted to speak to the mine management. And they got the response you summarized.
Now, I'm sure, I think you did say to Mr. Butlander, if they had engaged them at that stage, the possibility of violence ensuing would be minimal.
Yes.
Now, then there is were you told that during the afternoon or the evening of the 15th of August, that Mr. Matunjwa had spoken to the mine workers on strike at the copy about going back to work? Were you told that? Were you ever told that?
I was not told. I saw it, I think, on television.
You saw it on television. And we would argue that, in fact, maybe what you saw was when you went there for the second time on the 16th, but it's neither here nor there, but you saw. We are talking about the 15th.
Yes.
You were not told about the fact that in the afternoon or evening of the 15th, Mr. Matunjwa went there, escorted by the police to the copy.
I finally saw that either in the newspapers or on television.
Yes. Now, my sense, and I'm putting it to you, was that the mine workers were receptive when Matunjwa came and told them about going back to work. They said to him, he must come back tomorrow, and there was a ray of hope that the impasse would be solved. Did you know about that?
No, I'm not aware of that.
You saw, however, subsequently. Well, I'm saying on the 15th, the day before the events that have sparked the commission on the 16th. What I'm suggesting to you is that on the evening of the 15th, Mr. Matunja went to the copy, spoke to the mine workers. Mine workers said, you know, if you want us to go back to work, you must go and indicate, come back tomorrow. We want the employer to meet with us. And it appeared that the impasse could be resolved. Now, are you aware that this was one of the features of the 15th of August 2012, that there was a ray of hope that the impasse could be resolved under those circumstances?
I'm not aware about the extent to which it was a ray of hope. What I do know is that a message had been communicated that they wanted to meet with management.
When did you learn about this after Matunja had been to the copy on the 15th?
I would have been either aware of it soon after it happened, but I do not now have a full recollection of how the information came to me.
Were you told by Lonmin management on the 15th, or did you get to know about it subsequently?
I think I got to know about it subsequently.
So there was nothing told to you by management?
Not to my
on the
recollection.
15th. Now, I will want to argue that you, not only as the ex-SG of NUM, GS.
Yes, General Secretary.
General Secretary,
Yes.
and the Lonmin, but also in your capacity as a Lonmin shareholder, a non-executive director, would you disagree with me that you were uniquely placed to influence all the parties and stakeholders to come to an amicable or negotiated solution, provided that you were proactive and you acted impartially? Would you disagree with that?
I would not agree. I was just a non-executive director, no involvement in the daily management operations of the company, and I was not involved in the negotiations with the unions as well. And non-executive directors never get involved in wage negotiations. The fact that I was General Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers would have no bearing in this. And the fact that Shanduka was a shareholder, also minimal bearing, because we were just a minority shareholder amongst a body of bigger shareholders. Thank you.
Maybe I should indicate where I come from.
Yes.
If you had decided to do it, there is no law, there's nothing that could have prevented you from doing it. The fact that you are non-executive director and the fact that management deals, I mean, we know this. In terms of your own evidence, on the evening of the 15th, you had known that security employees at Lonmin had been killed.
Yes.
You had known that on the 13th, 3 mine workers had died.
Yes.
And that 2 members of the SAPS had not only just been killed in your description, they had been killed in the most brutal ways.
Yes.
Now, I'm simply saying to you you have stature, and you have direct links to the company. You are a non-exec, you are a chairman of the transformation committee, as now have come to know. And this is a matter about which you are not neutral in your views, as will go through your emails. I'm simply saying, if you had decided to do something, there was nothing that could have stopped you from doing so. Do you agree with that?
I should be flattered by the importance that you seem to think I had and the influence with regard to this issue, but it's simply not the case. When one is a non-executive director of a company, you deal with issues as they are presented to you by the executive management. You act together with others, and you therefore do not have the power that you seem to ascribe to a person who's a non-executive director. All you can ever do is to bring things to the notice of others. For instance, when it came to the issue of saying dismissal of workers, I did say that dismissal of workers is not an option that should be considered. The extent to which whether that was done or not is something that obviously can be examined. So the power and the authority that you say one had is simply not the case. You work with other people.
I appreciate that, and I think at the time that you said it, I said there's a lot of credit in what you are saying. But what I'm putting to you, and I'm doing so. You are concerned with the escalating violence.
Yes.
You are concerned with the deaths. Are you suggesting that simply because in terms of protocol, you did not have it in you to say, I, Cyril Ramaphosa, I am not going to stand on ceremony. This thing is getting out of hand. Let me get the opportunity of getting into grips with this thing. Call your transfer. I want to meet the union members. I want to meet management. I want to meet the police. I, as myself, I want to meet the mine workers who are on strike. I want to address them. Now, I see you have been nodding. I'm putting it to you. There was nothing that stopped you from doing so. Isn't that right?
Objectively speaking, yes.
Now, I want us to look at BBB4. Is these emails? I'm sorry, you are going to be around with this. We are going to go to the emails again.
No problem.
Yes. Now, Mr. Chairman, I don't know where that one, that's 2898. In your bundle, I'm told it's page 15. And what is it?
And I'll tell you where it is if I can.
It's 444.5, I'm told, Mr. Chairman. Triple B.
That's page 16, I think. That's page 16 of the bundle.
No, the one I want is the one where I believe it's page 15 of the Lonmin bundle, where there is an email which was sent by the witness to Mr. Jamieson.
There's one sent by Mr. Jamieson to the witness on page 15, and
oh yeah, this is the one.
And there's There's one sent by the witness to Mr. Jamieson, which is on page 16 of the foot. It looks like just after, it looks like 12:18 p.m. on the 15th of August. Is that the one you want? It's the one where he agrees with the characterization. Is that the one you want?
Point 2. Triple B, quadruple A, even.
No, just give me the time of the one you want and the day I can find it for you. I'll act as your junior for a moment. You've got juniors, but never mind, I'll do it for you. What exactly do you want?
I want triple B 4-2, that one. I can point it, Mr. Chairman. That's the one I want. Now, what one is that, Mr. Chairman? That's what I want.
What's the date? What's it about?
It's 0047. Though it say 15 August, I suspect probably was, yeah. It's an email which the witness sent to Mr. Jamieson. Now the juniors agree it's 4.1.
Well, there's one he sent to Mr. Jamieson on page 16 of the London bundle. That's Exhibit Triple B 4.5. The one at 4.1 is one that he sent to Mr. Roger Finnemore. Sorry, no. It's 4.1 is one, the foot of the page, the earlier one is one you sent to Mr. Jamieson on the 15th. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Mr. Finnemore on the 15th. And then he replied to you at 1:07 p.m. on the same page, saying, thanks, very much appreciated, look forward to talking to you. But the one from the witness to Mr. Finnemore is 4.1, is page 14 of the bundle, and the one the witness sent to Mr. Jamieson is around about the same time, also the 15th of August. That's page 16, that's Triple B 4.5. More assistance to you I can't be.
Yes, the one on the screen, Mr. Chairman.
That's the one to Mr. Finnemore, not Mr. Jamieson. The one
Yes.
on the screen.
Roger is Finnemore.
You've got to distinguish your Finnemores from your Jamieson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the guidance.
I'll do my best.
Roger is Finnemore. Now, in this, there are three things that I want to highlight. The first is that you state that you have already spoken to the Minister of Minerals at the time, Minister Shabangu,
Yes.
and you have told her that her inaction and silence were bad for government. Would that be a good summary of what you communicate there?
Yes, it is correct.
You also told her that you and she should have a discussion and see what she needs to do. You see that?
Yes, I see it.
You also indicated that you had had a discussion with NUM and were planning another one. We have already dealt with this one, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, another email. It's in the Lonmin bundle, page 26. Triple B. I think somebody's name. 4.2. It's an email from Mr. Jamieson to you at that time, 9:43 a.m. I think this email was read before, but can you just summarize it with your consent, or with your agreement, yeah, Jamieson is saying that Minister Shabangu has been interviewed on the radio and had said during that radio interview that what was happening at Lonmin was a wage dispute and that management and the unions should sit down and sort it out. You see that?
Yes.
And that what is clear, therefore, from this email is that Mr. Jamieson was not simply referring to the crimes that had been committed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Well, crimes are crimes. I mean, if people have been killed, they have been killed. That's a crime. And there was going to be no need to characterize them as such. The minister would also never be saying that criminal actions are a matter for management and the unions to resolve by sitting down and negotiating. You will agree with that?
Yes.
So she says it as she sees it. This is a labor dispute, and it's not as though she's unaware that there have been criminal acts. So, would you accept my suggestion that he must have been referring to Jamieson, because this is his email. He must have been referring to the situation as a whole. In other words, to the labor dispute as well as the acts of crime. Do you agree with that?
Let me understand that question better, please.
Yes. You see, if one reads this email
Yes.
in context,
Yes.
one accepts that it was manifest that because of people who had died and all of that,
Yes.
that crime had been committed.
Indeed.
Yes. But in the course or when these were happening, there was also this labor dispute. So when Jamieson talks about what is obtaining at Lonmin, surely he is referring to both the strike as well as the acts of violence that have resulted. Do you agree with that?
Well, he would be referring to everything that's happening there.
Indeed.
Yes.
Now, you see, why I say we were going to do an exercise with you is because Jamieson seems to take an issue with the minister characterizing this as a labor unrest. She says the minister, what she's saying is unhelpful. Do you see that?
Yes, I see it.
And he says it's unhelpful because she characterizes it as a labor dispute. Isn't that right?
Indeed.
He seems to take an issue with the fact that the minister sees this matter as one in relation to which management and the unions should sit down and resolve the matter through negotiation. Do you see that?
Yes.
It's confirmed by the fact that he says he had 2 discussions with the DG, and in each case characterized this as not an industrial relations issue. That is now Jamieson.
Yes.
But as civil unrest destabilization, a criminal issue that could not be resolved without political intervention and needs the situation to be stabilized by the police or army. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Now, it seems to me that, and you will agree with me or disagree, but it seems to me that it is very clear, and this I want to put it to you, that Mr. Jamieson does not appear to be saying look, this is ridiculous. The minister is wrong. This is clearly a criminal matter which will have to be sorted out by a combination of political intervention and rolling out the army. Doesn't that appear to be what he's saying?
Well, from that email, yes.
Would you agree that Jamieson here is putting out how he wants the situation to be characterized by government? Do you agree?
Well, what he's saying is that the minister should see it in the way that he's describing it.
Yes. Yeah. Now, if one looks at the overall impression that then one is left with, would you agree that the purpose here seems to be twofold? The first is to get political involvement to ensure that the police and the army are brought in, to use his words, to stabilize the situation. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
That is what that email conveys.
Well, he's suggesting, as I read it,
Yes.
that because people are dying and people are being injured, it would be best if the police were able to be present on the ground to stabilize the situation.
But more importantly, it seems to me, and this is what I put to you, he is keen to get political involvement that will ensure that the police and the army are brought in to stabilize the situation. Do you agree?
So he would like, as I read it, the people who are responsible for, say, law and order to act so that the situation is stabilized.
He says it in so many words. You seem to evade the nuance of political involvement. He says so there. He says so in so many words.
I would read that as meaning, yes, political
In
intervention.
each issue that could not be resolved without political intervention
Yes.
and needs the situation stabilized by police or army.
Yes.
So he is actually calling for political intervention. That's the one aspect. Yes. The other is that he is keen to convey and this is an email to you, that as opposed to what Minister Shabangu had allegedly said, the solution was, and you recall what Minister Shabangu had said, management and unions and workers must sit together and resolve this labor dispute. That is what Minister Shabangu had proposed. There must be negotiation to resolve the issue. This email comes across clearly as being opposed to what Minister Shabangu had suggested should be done. Surely you would agree with that.
I would not agree with that construction. I would say that what Jamieson was saying is that the situation that we have at hand now is leading to the loss of life and the injury of people, and he wants the situation to be stabilized, and after it is stabilized, clearly they will have a situation where they will be able to deal with whatever problems. So he was dealing with, if one can use the word, a situation of exigency or emergency, because he wants, as I understand his email, to make sure that lives are saved and no further deaths happen.
Except that he doesn't say so. That's the problem. You see, he doesn't say so. His email is very clear. If Shabangu is going to characterize this whole thing as a labor dispute in relation to which management and workers should get together and try and resolve it through negotiation, that is unhelpful, because this is not what it is.
I would respectfully disagree, because he uses the word, the situation needs to be stabilized by the police. The situation that's unfolding is that people are being killed. And as you yourself have said, that crimes are being committed. And that is what I believe Jamieson was concerned with, that let us get the situation stabilized.
Well, I think the emails and objective evidence, I hear what you're saying. We will argue that, in fact, what is very clear here is that Jamieson is seeking to disabuse the minister from characterizing this thing as anything but a criminal act. He doesn't want the minister to characterize it as a labor dispute. He doesn't say, first stabilize the situation, then negotiate. He doesn't say that.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Jamieson, if he is to be a witness in this commission, should be able to answer that for himself. I'm merely giving the viewpoint in response to the question that you posed. I think
except he was sending it to you.
Indeed, even if he was, but he's the best placed person to give those answers.
Mr. Spence, it's now 3 o'clock. I was proposing to take tea adjournment now. You've got another half an hour, I think. So if we take the tea adjournment now, resume it promptly, if we can, if it's possible for us, at 3:15, then you'll have a clear run through to 3:45. But I'm in your hands. If that's convenient to you, we'll go that way. But if you want to round off this point first.
Mr. Chairman, we can take whatever it is that we are taking at this time, tea. And
we're adjourned now for a quarter of an hour for tea or coffee.
To do the story. Oh, Stefan Hofstadter put it on Zoom on this. Trying to find the tape. Ja, ja. Nee, right.
Commission resumes. Mr. Ramaphosa, you're still under oath. Mr. Nsebeza, you're still cross-examining.
Thank you. If we could have the email BBB 4.2. Now that we have agreed that Mr. Jamieson was referring to the situation as a whole, both the crimes that had been committed as well as the labor unrest. If we then look at what he further says, he says, now that it appears that there are approximately 800 police officers, they would be grateful if you see where he talks about 800, we are grateful the police now have about 800 people on site. You see that?
Yes, I see it.
And then he then goes on to talk about the next challenge being to take appropriate action so we can get people back to work. It would be good to have some independent confirmation that the police have plans to sustain a presence for at least a week, and numbers don't wane by the weekend. You see that?
Yes, I see it.
Now, what is this appropriate action which Mr. Jamieson was talking about to get people back to work?
I don't know what he was specifically referring to there, and I think he would be the best person who can answer that. I can only surmise and say that he clearly was continuing with his theme to say the situation should be stabilized so that people can go back to work.
Can I propose that?
I'm sorry, Mr. Nsebeza. See, the key words are ensuring they remain and take appropriate action so that we can get people back to work. When I read this initially, I thought he wanted the police to do something to get the people back to work, which wouldn't be the appropriate action for the police. But maybe the phrase, we can get people back to work, gives a clue to what was meant. I'm not sure.
Precisely.
Can I propose what probably could be another? Could he have meant, for instance, one of two things? Either that a large presence of police would be interpreted as a threat of force and strikers would be intimidated to abandoning the strike. Or the police would actually use force to break the strike. Would that be an unfair interpretation of what he says there?
I would not know whether he meant all those things.
What did you understand him to mean?
I understood him to mean that we would be able to restore some peace and calm in the area so that they can then be able to get to a situation where people can return back to work. That's what I understood.
Now, how could that ensure that people went back to work? It seems to me that would only be the case if lawmen believe that the majority of the people were on strike because of the intimidation or violence. Don't you agree?
When he says so that we can get people back to work, I fully don't know what he actually meant, whether he meant that there would be discussions that would enable people to agree to go back to work, or that those who voluntarily wanted to go back to work would do so. It could have been any of those.
But isn't it interesting? He links it. He says, we are grateful the police now have about 800 on site. Our next challenge is sustaining this, ensuring they remain and take appropriate action so we can get people back to work.
Yes.
It would be good to have some independent confirmation the police have plans to sustain a presence for at least a week, and numbers don't wane by the weekend. That's why I'm asking the question whether Lonmin believe that the majority of the people were on strike because of the intimidation or violence, and therefore the presence of the police in large numbers would ensure people going back to work.
I think they had a sense that some of the workers wanted to go back to work, as possibly intimated to them by the National Union of Mine Workers. It is possible, and I think through you, Mr. Chairman, that is a question that Mr. Jamieson would be best placed to answer.
But I'm sure Lonmin knew that the people were not on strike because they are intimidated. They quite clearly knew why the people were on strike, the rock drill operators. That was not the case, and Lonmin knew about it. In fact, Lonmin had even brought a labor court interdict. Do you have anything to say to that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not trying to be evasive, which is not my nature, but I think on this question, Mr. Jamieson would be best placed to answer this question for a number of reasons, but more principally because he was on the ground and he was dealing with issues as they evolved on the ground, and he was, if you like, the lead manager who was able to deal with all this as the CEO was indisposed.
Do you read from this email that it appears that it was Lonmin's agenda to get the police to break the strike, either by the threat or the actual use of force?
No, I don't read that into this email.
We will argue that it appears clearly from here that there seems to have been a concerted effort on the part of Lonmin to avoid having to negotiate higher wages. Do you have a comment you want to make?
I would not say a concerted effort. What I do know is that they did meet one of the line managers and discuss this issue, and some of the workers made a representation to the line manager. So talking had happened at some stage.
Are you talking about DeCosta?
Yes, sir.
That was before the strike?
Yes, sir.
And they have since then refused to speak to the mine workers who were on strike.
I was referring to discussions that had ensued.
Yes, the question was that it is clear, because now we are into the strike. It's not a question of what they did before.
Yes.
We are into the strike. We are putting to you, and this is what we are going to argue, that from the way this email reads, and the others we are going to put to you, Lonmin wanted to influence, one, Minister Shabangu in characterizing the strike the way they wanted it characterized. That we have agreed on.
Yes.
Now, and we also will say that their agenda in Lonmin was to get the police or the army to break the strike by the threat or actual use of force in order to avoid having to negotiate higher wages. And that is why they never got to a stage where they actually had meaningful negotiations with the workers. Do you want to make a comment on that?
I would say that is a question that you have to put to Jamieson. My own approach to these matters, which I've articulated here already, is that it is through negotiation and talking that you are able to resolve problems. It is possible, Mr. Chairman, that as the situation got from bad to worse, and as workers were being killed, that tended to cloud various initiatives that could have been embarked upon. But I think Lonmin, then he was really not acting CEO, but Jamieson would be best placed to answer that.
Right. I mean, we will argue the rest. Let's just look what your response was.
Yeah.
The email is, what is this? Mr. Chairman, is the one who's 289F. Is triple B for what? Where's
The
the
witness's response to Mr. Jamison's email is on page 16 of the bundle. Triple B 4.5.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's 4.5.
Yeah, Albert, thank you for email. I'm currently in Cape Town. I think that's it.
Sweares, I thank you for the consistent manner in which you're characterizing. Now, this was sent to Mr. Jameson at 12:18. You see that?
Yes, I see it.
I thank you for the consistent manner in which you are characterizing the current difficulties which we are going through. The terrible events that have unfolded cannot be described as a labor dispute. They are plainly dastardly criminal and must be characterized as such. In line with this characterization, there needs to be concomitant action to address this situation. You are absolutely correct in insisting that the minister and indeed all government officials need to understand that we are essentially dealing with a criminal act. I've said as much to the Minister of Safety and Security. Now, you are referring to the situation as a whole there. It is very clear to me. In other words, the labor unrest as well as the acts of criminality that have been taking place. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is correct.
In fact, now, it seems to me you say two things to Mr. Jameson. Even though you refer to the whole situation, labor dispute as well as acts of criminality. But what you say there, firstly, is that you agree with the characterization of the situation as criminal. Is that right?
Yes.
Secondly, you say that all government officials, including the minister, must be made to understand that. See that?
Yes.
And you confirm that you have already spoken to your colleague, the then Minister of Safety and Security, Minister Nathi Mthethwa.
Suggest
that
the
right?
person who has that cell phone, please leave the chamber. We can't have disturbances like that.
It was saying traffic.
Come back tomorrow morning.
I'm sorry, Deputy President, for that.
No,
But
no problem.
you confirm that you had already said as much to Minister Mthethwa. You see that?
Yes.
Yeah. And that it was in line with that kind of characterization that there needed to be concomitant action to address the situation. That's right, isn't it?
It is correct.
And we know that criminal acts are usually dealt with by the police. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, what one then concludes from what you say in your email is that you are saying, actually, I agree, the police must be brought in to deal with this criminal act. Is that right?
What was of great concern to me, Mr. Chairman, was that people were getting killed. They were being targeted and they were getting killed, and some of them were being killed in the most brutal manner, where body parts were being torn off their bodies, and they had already numbered up to 10. Now, that was primary in my concern.
Yes, but I mean, I don't think we have got to traverse this.
I wonder if the witness could finish his response.
I think that's
Actually,
I hadn't.
a valid point, Mr. Beza. I think the witness should.
I hadn't finished.
You hadn't finished. Well, finish
Yes.
now.
So that was my primary area of focus. And I did believe that these acts of targeting people and killing them in the way that they were being killed was of a criminal nature. And that the police needed to come, as I said earlier, identify and arrest those who were perpetrating these acts, with a view of ensuring that those who are perpetrating these acts do not continue to kill other people. That was my primary concern. Further loss of life is what I felt needed to be prevented.
Yes. Now, I hear you now at this point in your evidence. I was simply saying you considered, when you talked about this situation, you meant the whole situation, both the labor unrest that had arisen as well as the acts which are manifestly criminal, which we all agree about, where people had been killed. Now, I don't know whether you are changing your mind now or you are changing your mind then, because if you read this email, you are actually saying you will have a discussion with Minister Shabangu and stress that she should have a discussion with Roger, and we know what Roger has been saying. Roger is saying it's unhelpful to characterize this as a labor unrest. Isn't that right?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, could you just repeat the reference to Roger, because I never understood Roger to have such a position? I'm talking about Roger Phillimore, the chairman of Lonmin, then chairman.
Jamison's email, I'm sorry. It was Jamison's email that made the suggestion about.
Yes.
Yes. Now, what I'm saying is the exchange with Jamison indicates that you were going to do two things. Now, this is against the backdrop of your concession that when you talk about the situation, you talked about the labor unrest as well as the acts of criminality. Now, against that backdrop, this exchange of emails, I suggest and I put to you, you are attempting to persuade Minister Shabangu to change her characterization of the situation at Lonmin, that it is merely a labor dispute. She should change her characterization and characterize it as criminal. What do you say to that?
Well, yes, we're saying that people are getting killed in a criminal way, as you have admitted yourself. And we were saying we would like police to be brought on site to prevent further killings, further criminal activity where people are being killed in that way from taking place. So yes, that is the case.
Indeed. The second thing is that there will be a need to persuade Minister Shabangu to meet with Phillimore.
Yes.
And we know from previous emails, certainly from the previous email, that Mr. Phillimore's role was also going to be to persuade Mr. Shabangu to change her characterization. Minister Shabangu. If I came across as suggesting that she's Mr. Shabangu. Minister Shabangu, I'm sorry. We know that Mr. Phillimore's role was also going to be to persuade Minister Shabangu to change her characterization. Isn't that right?
Mr. Chairman, it's not my place to pose a question to the Council, but are you referring to Mr. Jamison or Mr. Roger Phillimore?
What happened was Mr. Jamison asked you to talk to the Minister,
Yes.
Shabangu, to encourage her to make time to talk to Mr. Phillimore.
Indeed.
So that's how they both come into it.
Okay.
Jamison's proposal to you is speak to the Minister, tell the Minister to talk to Mr. Phillimore, and what Mr. Zabeza suggests is we know what Mr. Phillimore would have said to the Minister because we've seen it in his email. I think that's your question. So,
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes.
You haven't got many minutes left, but
Indeed.
let's get the witness understand what you're putting. So
I understand. I understand.
So now are we all clear? We know that Phillimore's role, is it Roger? Phillimore's role was also going to be to persuade the Minister to change a characterization. We agree with that.
I don't know what the content of their discussion would have been, so it would be difficult for me to even presume what the content of that discussion would have been.
But you know,
Doesn't his email give a bit of a clue? Doesn't his email to you give a bit of a clue as to what he's likely to say to the minister?
Mr. Chairman, with respect, what I did know about Roger Philimo's desire to talk to the minister was that he had wanted to have communication with the minister broadly about the situation that was unfolding. The specific detail thereof, such as persuading him to characterize the situation as the council is outlining,
In
is
persuading her.
yes, I would not have known. But I'm not trying to split hairs on this one. I'm just stating what I think was the situation.
Did you, in fact, persuade her, in any event, to abandon the characterization that was just a wage dispute and to take a different view of the matter? And
Yes.
to, as it were, withdraw her, correct her previous public statement.
Indeed.
That it was just a wage dispute. Management and the workers must get together and sort the thing out.
Indeed.
Did you think that if that recipe which the minister had proposed had been followed, that the police wouldn't have to be called in, wouldn't have to try to deal with it as a law and order matter, but just management and workers get together, you think the problem would have gone away?
Mr. Chairman, it's not to exclude that possibility. I think it is eminently possible that if that track had been pursued, it could have borne some fruit. But what was of prime importance then was that we were dealing with a situation that was highly volatile, where people were getting killed. And for good or bad reason, we felt that we needed to stabilize the situation first, that we should prevent further people from getting killed. And in my view, that does not exclude the fact that once the situation is stabilized, or as you stabilize it, you'll be able to talk to people and negotiate.
Thank you. Mr. Sibeza, your time is up, but I take it you want... Would you like time to deal with one more point quickly? Or shall I invite Ms. Barnes to start cross-examining on behalf of AMCU?
Mr. Chair, with your permission, AMCO are quite happy to arrange through the chair that I could do the cross for the next 13 minutes, and it's the end of the day.
Let's not, I won't just take your word for it. Let's ask some time. Is Mr. Sibeza right? I'm not reflecting on you, Mr. Sibeza.
Yes, Chair, that's in terms of the arrangement.
All right.
We're quite happy. Thank you, Chair.
Let's see how you use the next 13 minutes.
It will be very fruitful, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, if now, from everything else that I've been able to get from the emails, it does appear that you finally got your colleague, well, she's your colleague now, I don't think she was your colleague then. You finally got Minister Shabangu to change her characterization of the situation from that of merely a labor dispute to that one of being a criminal act. Isn't that right?
That's what he's just said to the chair.
You just said that to the chair, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Now, I'm going to want to, and I put it this to you, that you and Lonmin had a clear agenda. One, it was to characterize this as criminal. Am I being unfair to you?
That the acts of killing...
No, the situation. You wanted the situation to be characterized as criminal.
Could I invite my learned friend to define what he means by the situation so that we can get some particularity into what is being asked? These generalities are not entirely helpful.
I've been more pointed in my entire cross-examination of the witness, and that's why I made concessions. I've not been laboring on generalities. I've been saying consistently, and there's been a concession to that when they talk about the situation, he, Philemon, and whoever else, they are talking about the labor unrest as well as the acts of criminality that have arisen. I can never have been more particular than that.
Actually, Chair, I think the record will suggest that there's quite a good deal of ambiguity in the way in which these questions have been posed. So it might be important to have my learned friend be very specific as to what he means by the situation.
All right, Mr. Spears, I think you can make it more specific than you have, and do so, and then we'll get a focused answer from the witness that may help you at the end of the day.
Mr. Chairman, there isn't much time. I will argue the rest. I want to put it to you that you and Lonmin may have been keen that the emphasis should switch from Lonmin having to negotiate a solution to government. Negotiate a solution to one which government should be influenced to deploy the police and or the army in order to break the strike by the threat of or actual use of force. Do you have anything to say to that?
Could you rephrase that so that I can understand it better?
You see, we have put to you, and I'm putting it to you now, that the characterization of this situation as being just criminal, and specifically saying it is not a labor dispute, was an attempt to make sure that Lonmin doesn't have to negotiate a solution, but that government should be influenced to deploy the police and or the army. That is what I argue is coming out of this, and I put that to you.
To say, in order to break the strike.
In order to break the strike, either by the threat of or actual use of force.
My own view is that was not the intention, say, to break the strike. The intention was to ensure that there are no further acts of violence that would lead to the loss of life and injury of people.
You see, if you are going to get the police to break up a strike of 2,000 to 3,000 mine workers, many of whom were armed with assegais and pangas, by the threat or use of force, surely there would have been a foreseeability of the possibility of the conflict between the strikers and the police ensuing and deaths occurring. You will agree with that, isn't it?
I was really focusing more on the prevention of further loss of life and injury of people.
Yes, but the pointed question that I'm putting...
And the way that would manifest itself would be where lives would be threatened, like the lives of these police, security people and workers who were either killed in the office or thereafter, that with police presence would be prevented, and that those who were perpetrating such acts would be arrested.
Are you suggesting, as was the request from the email, are you suggesting that if the army and or heavily armed police were to confront 2,000 to 3,000 mine workers, and you were aware as at that stage that there had been another confrontation in which 2 police officers had died and 3 mine workers had also died, are you suggesting that it was not foreseeable that if those 800 police were at the place or the army and they would confront 2,000 to 3,000 workers, that it could never have been foreseen by you or members of the Lonmin management that there was a likelihood of a conflict ensuing between the strikers and the police and the army and the likelihood of fatalities? Are you genuinely suggesting that
Mr. Chairman,
this was not foreseeable?
Mr. Chairman, my interaction with the minister had to do only with make sure that further loss of life is prevented. How they were going to deploy, from a logistical point of view, their personnel is something that I have no expertise or knowledge of.
Yes, I accept. Again, I'm going to come, and you will forgive me. You are not just a board member from Lonmin. You are Cyril Ramaphosa. You know what the 1987 strike was. You know that condition. You know that these flare up in violence. And I want to put it to you that a person in your position with your track record, like most of us, would have in that kind of situation have found it was absolutely imperative that nothing of the nature that happened in Boipatong, Bisho, Sharpeville happened. You are Cyril Ramaphosa. So, did you deliberately not want to know how these about 800 sustained there would contain the acts of criminality, or you chose not to know?
Mr. Chairman, with respect, it is not whether I wanted to know or did not want to know. Matters of deployment of police is something that is not an area that I'm knowledgeable in or am an expert in. Council refers to 1987 and also Boipatong. My concern was precisely to prevent situations where more and more people would be killed, like what happened during the 1987 strike and indeed in places like Boipatong. So that was the overriding concern that I had. And forgive me, Council, if I say that how the police were going to be deployed is something that clearly this commission has to deal with through interrogating or cross-examining people who are in the police themselves.
Before the events of the 16th of August, did you know that the provincial commissioner, General Mbombo, had actually given a media briefing on Lonmin's premises, attended by senior members of Lonmin management, in which he had announced this to the world, that the police would be ending the matter on that day?
No, I did not.
You only got to know about that later on?
After the event.
Time is nearly up, Mr. In fact, it is up. But,
yes, Mr. Chairman, can I just check.
Yes. He's checking. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
You told us that you were going, it's in one of your emails, you were going to have a meeting with Mr. Sekwana and Mr. Mtlatsi, I think the gentleman's name is, and on the Friday,
Yes.
to discuss how NUM could go forward with this matter. I think that's the phrase you used.
Yes.
What exactly did you envisage? I know the meeting hadn't taken place, but presumably never did take place. But what did you envisage was likely to emerge from that meeting?
Well, as it turned out, the meeting never took place, Mr. Chairman, but what one would have envisaged was to give some counsel, give some ideas, and also, I think more properly, to get a proper briefing from the union that was on the ground, and if need be, to share some thoughts and ideas of what could be done to try and bring normality to the situation. That's what one had envisaged.
Mr. Chairman,
So it sounds from that you didn't think that anything would happen on the Thursday, or any action would be taken by the police to quite break the strike or bring the situation to an end on the Thursday, because you were going to have your meeting on the Friday. Is that a fair inference?
Yes, sir.
And there was also mention in one of the letters of a desire or an expectation, I think, that the police would be there for at least a week. The numbers wouldn't wane, I think was the phrase used.
Yes.
So does that mean that you and your colleagues didn't anticipate any police action of the kind that took place on
No.
Thursday?
No, we did not. I certainly did not expect it.
Mr. Deputy President, can I just ask you, do I understand that as at the time the negotiations were taking place at the Kopi on the 14th, 15th and 16th, that you were unaware that the strikers had specifically asked to speak with Lonmin management, and that Lonmin management had taken the position that they would not interact with them?
I was not aware.
And you were also unaware of the position that Lonmin had taken?
Yes, I was not aware.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Beza?
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask one question, just on privilege? You, at one stage, you chaired a BEE commission.
Yes, sir.
Black Economic Empowerment. And part of that was to empower previously disadvantaged people.
Yes.
And if you are an organ of state, which you are not, because you are an individual, in the procurement of goods and services, there was a view that previously disadvantaged entities
Yes.
should get preference.
Yes.
Now, as a parting shot, I'm going to say you must look at your legal team. When you procure those services,
Yes.
we must see a reflection of a South Africa in those services. Today, all those friends of mine and colleagues of mine are not representative. They are not what you were speaking to in terms of black economic empowerment. Would you agree with that?
I don't know what you mean exactly.
I'm talking about my friend there, Dave, and my friend there, Mike, and the other. Your legal team is not reflective of an empowerment process.
Mr. Chairman, does this have any relevance to the issue that we're discussing
It's
now?
no relevance at all, but if you decline to answer, you might find inferences being drawn against you by others, although not by this commission.
Okay.
You look at all the legal teams there, I think 90% of them are non-racial.
Message understood.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On that positive note, we'll adjourn till 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Oh, are we done? Okay.
For today.